In 2025, green hydrogen quietly crossed an important threshold. Not a cost milestone, not a breakthrough announcement, but something arguably more meaningful. A developer doubled real revenues in a market that many still consider pre-commercial. That developer was Lhyfe, and the signal matters not because it proves green hydrogen is suddenly cheap, but because it reveals how economics begin to stabilize when systems start working together. For years, green hydrogen discussions have been dominated by projections, targets, long-term curves that assume scale will eventually resolve today's challenges. What has been missing from many of these conversations is evidence of repeatable commercial activity, revenue that comes not from grants or pilot programs, but from actual hydrogen delivery into the market. Lhyfe's 2025 performance offers a rare data point that allows us to move beyond theory and into execution reality. The first thing to understand is that doubling revenue does not mean doubling profitability. It does not mean hydrogen is suddenly inexpensive, and it certainly does not mean the industry's cost challenges are solved. What it does mean is that a green hydrogen developer has begun to align production, offtake, operations, and market demand well enough to scale commercial transactions. That alignment is the real story. Green hydrogen economics are often discussed as a single variable problem, typically centered on electricity prices or electrolyzer costs. In reality, revenue growth emerges when multiple system constraints are reduced at the same time. Lhyfe's experience illustrates that progress does not come from one dramatic improvement, but from incremental coordination across the value chain. One of the most overlooked factors in green hydrogen economics is utilization. Electrolyzers are capital-intensive assets, and their economics improve dramatically as operating hours increase. However, utilization is not simply a function of technical availability. It depends on power access, grid conditions, demand timing, storage capability, and operational flexibility. Lhyfe's revenue growth suggested improved utilization, not by waiting for perfect conditions, but by structuring projects that could operate reliably within existing constraints. Another critical component is offtake structure. Hydrogen revenue only materializes when buyers are willing to commit to contracts, even if those contracts begin at modest volumes. Many hydrogen projects struggle to reach this stage because of uncertainty around price, reliability, and long-term supply. Lhyfe's ability to grow revenue indicates progress in building trust with customers who are willing to integrate hydrogen into their operations, despite early-stage economics. This is where system-level thinking becomes essential. Hydrogen is not a drop-in commodity. For most customers, adopting hydrogen requires operational adjustments, infrastructure modifications, and risk acceptance. Revenue growth signals that these barriers are being addressed, not eliminated, but managed well enough to allow transactions to occur. That distinction matters. From an economic perspective, revenue growth is a leading indicator of market formation. It does not signal maturity, but it does signal movement from concept to commerce. For green hydrogen, that shift is particularly important because so many projects remain stuck between feasibility and execution. Lhyfe's performance suggests that execution, not ambition, is what begins to unlock economic momentum. Power sourcing is another area where economics are shaped more by systems than by headline prices. While low-cost renewable electricity is essential, the reliability and predictability of power supply are equally important. Intermittent access may lower average costs on paper, but reduce real operating hours. Revenue growth implies that power sourcing strategies are becoming more aligned with operational needs, rather than purely optimized for theoretical cost minima. Financing also plays a role, even when revenue growth is modest in absolute terms. Lenders and investors pay close attention to revenue trajectories because they indicate whether assumptions about demand and execution hold in practice. Doubling revenue strengthens the narrative that hydrogen projects can transition from grant-supported demonstrations to bankable commercial operations, even if margins remain thin. This is particularly relevant in the current market environment, where capital is more selective and tolerance for speculative projects has declined. Revenue, even at early stages, changes conversations with financiers. It shifts discussions from whether hydrogen can sell at all to how it can scale responsibly. That shift is subtle but significant. Another lesson embedded in Lhyfe's performance is geographic and project sizing discipline. Many hydrogen strategies have emphasized massive projects designed to serve future export markets. While these projects may play a role long-term, revenue growth today is more likely to come from smaller distributed facilities serving local or regional demand. This approach reduces infrastructure complexity, shortens development timelines, and aligns supply more closely with demand. Smaller-scale projects also allow for learning. Operational data gathered from real facilities improves future designs, reduces uncertainty, and supports better cost forecasting. Revenue growth accelerates this feedback loop. Each kilogram sold provides information that improves the next project. In this way, economics improve not through theoretical optimization, but through iterative system learning. It is also important to understand what revenue growth does not imply. It does not mean hydrogen is competitive with fossil alternatives across all applications. It does not mean subsidies are no longer required. And it does not mean that large-scale industrial decarbonization will happen automatically. Lhyfe's experience highlights progress within constraints, not the disappearance of those constraints. From a policy perspective, revenue growth offers a useful calibration point. Policymakers often focus on capacity targets, but capacity without utilization does not generate emissions reductions or economic resilience. Revenue indicates that capacity is being used. This distinction should inform how incentives are designed and evaluated going forward. For the broader green hydrogen sector, Lhyfe's 2025 performance suggests that economics improve when projects are treated as integrated systems rather than isolated assets. Power, electrolyzers, storage, customers, financing, and operations must evolve together. Weakness in any one area can stall revenue growth, even if other components perform well. Fuel cells, while downstream of hydrogen production, are part of this system story as well. Revenue growth in hydrogen production strengthens the case for fuel cell deployment by improving supply confidence. Conversely, growth in fuel cell demand supports hydrogen revenue by creating predictable offtake. These feedback loops are essential for long-term system stability. The lesson for developers is not to chase scale prematurely, but to chase coherence. Projects that align technical design with market reality are more likely to generate revenue, even if they appear modest compared to headline megaprojects. Coherence, not size, is what builds economic credibility. For investors, the signal is equally nuanced. Revenue growth does not eliminate risk, but it reduces uncertainty. It demonstrates that customers exist, contracts can be executed, and systems can function under real-world conditions. That information is valuable, even if financial returns remain constrained in the near term. For utilities and industrial users, Lhyfe's performance suggests that hydrogen adoption does not require perfect economics from day one. It requires reliability, transparency, and gradual integration. Systems that support incremental adoption are more likely to succeed than those that demand immediate transformation. Looking ahead, the question is not whether Lhyfe's revenue can continue to grow, but whether the broader sector can replicate the conditions that made that growth possible. That will depend less on single breakthroughs and more on systemic improvements across power markets, grid infrastructure, permitting processes, and demand aggregation. Green hydrogen economics in 2025 remain challenging, but they are no longer purely speculative. Revenue growth shows that commercial pathways exist, even if they are narrow and constrained. The task now is to widen those pathways without undermining the systems that support them. This is where disciplined execution becomes decisive. Projects that overpromise and underdeliver erode confidence. Projects that grow steadily, even slowly, build it. Lhyfe's experience underscores the value of credibility in an industry that has often struggled to maintain it. Ultimately, sustainability is not measured by announcements, but by outcomes. Revenue is one such outcome. It reflects not only market demand, but operational capability, system integration, and execution discipline. Doubling revenue in 2025 does not solve green hydrogen's economic challenges, but it shows that progress is possible when systems begin to align. For the energy transition, that alignment matters. Green hydrogen will play a role only if it can move beyond isolated pilots and into repeatable commercial activity. Lhyfe's performance suggests that this transition has begun, not everywhere and not at scale, but in ways that deserve careful attention. The most important takeaway is not that green hydrogen is suddenly viable, but that viability emerges through system coherence rather than technological optimism. Projects that respect this reality will shape the next phase of hydrogen development. Those that ignore it will continue to struggle. In that sense, Lhyfe's 2025 revenue growth is not a victory lap. It is a case study, one that highlights how green hydrogen economics begin to stabilize when systems, not slogans, lead the way. And that is the conversation the hydrogen sector now needs to have.